together. Why can't we? Why can't we?
At least one joke who weighs more than me.
Together. Why can't we?
I look at that ant, but I left my bloody soldering iron at home.
Hello, hello, hello. I hope we're working here.
Loud and clear.
Good afternoon, Auckland. You look beautiful today. You look absolutely amazing. Make some noise. This, brothers and sisters, this is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy sounds like. We are gathered here today, brothers and sisters, to try and stop a despicable piece of legislation that will change the very nature of this country. Make no mistake, this is the first stage towards a mass surveillance state, and every one of you deserves your privacy. You are not criminals.
Yeah.
Today we hear from some of the leading voices trying to stop this despicable piece of legislation. Please welcome our first speaker today, Dr. Rodney Harrison.
Yeah. I'm not needing one, Joe. Sweet. That bloody amp again.
It's not revolution why it's necessary.
Testing, 1, 2, 3, can everybody hear that?
Over there we can.
I've got John Minto holding the mic. What more could one ask for? Now, I'm a lawyer and I've been asked to speak for only 5 minutes, and no lawyer can possibly do that. But for those of you who weren't at the really wonderful meeting that took place on Thursday, that footage has been uploaded, and if you want to know what the outstanding other speakers, as well as I myself, said in detail about this bill, I suggest you go there. In the time available, I have two major areas of concern. First, content and operational effect of the bill itself. Secondly, the cynical disregard of democratic due process, what lawyers call the rule of law, with which it is being enacted. First, dealing with content and operational effect. Now, the current GCSB Act is limited to the gathering and analysis of foreign intelligence, which means it excludes spying on New Zealanders. This bill introduces 3 new functions, vaguely worded and with overbroad language, and no effective limits on storage and use. Now, use especially is a real concern, because use actually means sending it overseas. And Peter Dunn, to whom I will come, admits that the bill does not. The bill does not restrain export of data harvested by the GCSB under the new powers to overseas, for example, to the USA. But he doesn't think it needs to address that. Now, the result is, under the bill, the GCSB will be covertly spying on New Zealanders, and as regards metadata without limit, without the need for a warrant, and free to pass, as I said, to overseas agencies. Now, turning to the disregard of democratic due process, my concerns are that the public and MPs generally are being kept in ignorance of the real reasons for and practical implications for New Zealand and New Zealanders of this legislation. It's being rushed through unnecessarily. The excuse being given by John Key is that the Kim Datacom case rendered unlawful a little bit of innocuous provision of GCSB expertise to other agencies such as the police and the SIS. I consider that is a load of rubbish.
Yeah!
If GCSB has expertise, and no doubt it has some, the experts concerned could simply be seconded across to the police or the SIS, which could use their services. That's common in the public service. It does not require legislation. It's an excuse to rush this through, but it's a nonsense excuse in my view.
Damn straight.
The next point is that New Zealanders are, as a consequence, being robbed of the opportunity to have an informed, rational debate about the sort of society we want this to be. Yes. How much of a surveillance society do we want to live in? Isn't it already bad enough? Why does it have to lurch headlong down a path to 1984?
Yeah.
Why are we not being consulted about it?
Why indeed?
We are being robbed of this opportunity for a debate at the very same time as other Western societies, including the United States, are saying, oh, stop the bus, let's see if we shouldn't back up a bit on this path that we're going down. So at the same time as other societies we can compare to ours are looking to turn back or reverse a bit, New Zealand under John Key and this government is lurching headlong down this track. Now, the other thing I want to address under the democracy issues heading, is the possible one vote majority with which this bill may be passed, which I've called the done deal. Now, the done deal has three justifications. One is that there'll be a change to the degree of oversight from just having the Inspector General, traditionally a retired judge of conservative inclination. The Inspector General will get two helpers, appointed by government, no doubt, and we've seen what the national government's track record on appointments to public office has been in recent times. So, is that helpful? I don't think so. But my main concern is that if you have legislation which is overbroad, far-reaching and intrusive, and you get oversight of what's being done under that legislation, it's meaningless, because oversight simply looks at whether you've overstepped your mark. And if your mark is way out there in front, then no problem. The oversight is meaningless. The other done deal aspect is a periodic review of our security legislation, the first conveniently after the next election in 2015. And as I said at the meeting the other night, the fact is that when intrusive powers are conferred, history shows that they are never taken away again. They only are ever increased. And then finally, in the Dunn deal, Mr. Dunn is given the opportunity to provide input into a Law Commission review of the definition of private communication. And I'm sure that this is very nice from Mr. Dunn as a sop, but I don't really think that having his input into that sometime in the future, it should really be much comfort to anyone. Now, it's very difficult. I usually just glance down at my notes and all I can see is two microphones. But I wanted to read to you a couple of quotes about from what Peter Dunn said at his press conference trying to justify the deal. These are quotes. Well, the government wanted to get the legislation through. It needed the votes, and I think when you've got sort of a willing buyer, willing seller, you know you can do a deal. And on the topic of not spying on New Zealanders, he said, it was, and it still might be, a view I hold as a principle. It was, and it still might be a principle.
Next to billboard.
And the final quote, he said, I didn't need to do a deal with him, John Key. I mean, he was shopping around for other votes. I felt that sort of deal that we might have been able to do in the terms of the interests that I had might have been better done that way than with some other potential buyers, that is to say Winston Peters. Now, is there anyone else that finds that language totally disdainful and a complete insult?
Fuck yeah!
I suggest our willing buyer, Mr. Dunn, has sold us all down the drain.
Hell yeah.
So it's easy to pour scorn on Peter Dunn, and I'm not just doing that for the sake of it, but to come to my final point, and that is this. Is there not MPs who are in the government and going to vote in favour of this bill? Is there not one of you, just one of you, who's prepared to take account of his or her principles and vote against? It has been done before, and it will only take one. Could even be you, John Banks. Payback time for that donation from Kim.com. So finally, I just want to say this on that theme. The government is voting on a conscience vote, or Parliament is voting on a conscience vote, on the Convention Centre casino legislation. A conscience vote on that legislation. How about a conscience vote on this legislation? Wouldn't that be better directed? Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Dr. Rodney Harrison. When a man of his mana, please give him a round of applause. When a man of his mana is warning us that our democracy is under threat, we need to listen to him, and we need to listen to him now. I am your MC for this afternoon, Martin Bomber Bradbury, and I assure you that is the worst nickname in the world right now. If you support this bill, do not turn up to Anzac Day. Our forebearers spilled blood on foreign shores to stop governments having this level of power over their citizenship. It is an outrage, ladies and gentlemen. It is an outrage. This is not a left-wing or right-wing issue. This is a New Zealand issue, and every MP who is voting for this should be ashamed of themselves. Our next speaker knows what it is like to live in a police state. She fled Pinochet. Julia Espinosa, ladies and gentlemen.
Kia ora, everybody. It's so great to see such an awesome turnout here today. Give yourselves a round of applause. So my name is Julia, and I must start with expressing my gratitude and privilege at being able to share with you some of my story, my experiences and thoughts on illegal spying in the GCSB bill before our Parliament. I was born and raised in Aotearoa, and I'm the daughter of 2 political refugees which had to flee the political unrest in Chile. Unfortunately, I too know firsthand what it is like to be illegally spied upon. My father was a political activist in Chile, fighting for democracy during Pinochet's CIA and Chicago Boys-led military coup, when more than 3,000 people were killed, 80,000 imprisoned, and 30,000 tortured. I will always remember that growing up, my family were under constant surveillance from the SIS. Our phones tapped, our house watched, direct threats were made against any political involvement here in New Zealand, and endless harassment not only on us as a family, but to our workplaces, our places of study, and also to our extended family members. My family has never been involved in anything illegal, but for some reason this government was feeling somewhat threatened. Threatened by our knowledge, or perhaps our determination to stand up and fight for what is rightfully ours.
Yeah!
Intelligence gathered in New Zealand on Chilean activists fighting the regime was being passed back to Pinochet's secret policemen, who were then using it to further crack down on movements fighting for democracy. The international solidarity campaign to isolate the murderous regime was absolutely crucial to the restoration of democracy. But New Zealand's government surveillance of peaceful protesters against Chilean naval ships' visits to Auckland and the New Zealand forestry investments in Chile helped to create a climate of fear amongst the Chilean refugee community. Who knew what was being passed back? And if you were a prominent political activist, would your family back home be jailed, be tortured, or be killed? The GCSB bill, if passed, will legalise the routine surveillance of New Zealand citizens, fighting in solidarity with human rights and democracy movements around the world. The information won't be staying in New Zealand. As we all know, it will be passed on to the NSA and the CIA through the Five Eyes ECHELON alliance, and then given to who knows what repressive regime the US government is propping up in Latin America, or Asia, or the Middle East. Yesterday in Santiago, Chile, young men and women were organising for freedom. They had to worry about the information being gathered by secret police here in Auckland. Tomorrow it could be in Suva, it could be in Saudi Arabia, or it could be in China. Should we allow intelligence gathered by the GCSB in New Zealand to be passed to cutthroat criminals by our American allies?
No!
I carry very close to me my family's experience in Chile, and every day I'm grateful for the opportunities Aotearoa and its people have given me and my loved ones. But this government gets ever more embarrassing by the day. Shameful.
Shame!
Once our information is out there, it is very hard to get it back. We need to defend our civil rights. And let's be very clear, what John Key and his government is trying to do is a violation of our human rights, and we must keep fighting.
Yeah!
Dream that governments all around the world will stop spying on their citizens, that one day on the green hills of Aotearoa, Kim.com, Edward Snowden, Tamaisi and Bradley Manning can sit, have a quarter and know that Obama, that John Key, that some wannabe James Bond somewhere isn't listening to them.
Yeah!
Without spying. That's all we're here fighting for today. Kia kaha, everyone.
Yeah!
Julia, thank you very much. We are not criminals, ladies and gentlemen. The next speaker is someone who has been fighting against the economic policies of the new right and the corporations for some time. Is that the GCSB? Hello. There we go, flying over us.
Yeah, look at that.
Forever, like a lidless eye of Mordor above us all. Fuck them. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Professor Jane Kelsey. Professor Jane Kelsey.
Kia ora koutou, can you hear us down the back?
Testing.
Working for both? Okay, does that work better for you?
Yeah!
No?
Hey?
Okay. It's great to have such a turnout here.
it'd be nice to think that the Prime Minister is hearing the message, but unfortunately we have deaf ears unless we can, in the next couple of days, really up the ante. When it became known that the GCSB had been unlawfully spying on 88 New Zealanders, I suddenly got a whole lot of telephone calls from the news media asking if I was one of them. And I said to them, how the hell would I know? It's a secret. How could I know? I wrote to the GCSB and I asked them and they said, we can't tell you because it's a secret. I don't know. But I'm going to tell you why I have pretty strong suspicions that give a lie to the claim that it's only people who are doing something wrong, something illegal, something to hide, who need to be worried about this bill. The reason why the media thought the GCSB might be interested in me and some others is that we've been campaigning for a long time to try and stop the sellout of our democracy, our sovereignty, our tino rangatiratanga, our right to decide our futures through free trade and investment deals negotiated secretly and signed by the executive offshore. The latest example of this is the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, a big international network that is determined to stop this sellout of our futures. The reason it's so important is that this will transfer not only to foreign states, but to foreign corporations, the right to challenge laws that are made in the interests of our people in our country through our political and constitutional processes. The Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement is also, if the US and its IT companies have their way, going to prevent us from having strong privacy laws that would stop the access to and transfer offshore of communications and metadata of the kind that we know that foreign companies are now trawling and using, including for our spy agencies, as privatized surveillance using these kinds of powers. So we are determined that we are going to stop this treaty.
Yeah.
But what we are doing is not illegal. We analyse incredibly turgid, boring and toxic texts. We lobby politicians, which is equally boring and sometimes as toxic. We talk to the media. We educate people. We even talk with negotiators and sometimes prepare analyses to help them to understand what's happening. Not our negotiators, because they don't want to listen, but other countries.
What about Facebook?
We hold teleconferences so that we can share the intelligence that we've gathered and develop strategies. None of this is illegal, but all of this our government views as treasonous. What we are doing is using lawful means and democratic processes to protect our futures and those of future generations. And for me as an academic, it is also making sure that my role as a taxpayer-paid public intellectual, working for a university that has a statutory obligation to act as a critic and conscience of society, do our jobs. The SIS was caught burgling the house of Aziz Chowdhury in Christchurch. It's one of those examples when we found out they were spying because they stuffed up. During the court case, which Rodney Harrison took on behalf of Aziz Chowdhury, we discovered that there was an interception warrant for placing bugs inside Aziz's house that had been signed by Jim Bolger not a few days before the APEC meeting, which was the excuse that was being used, but months before, and which was probably a rollover warrant. That was back in 1996. a responsibility to act in ways to protect New Zealand's international and economic well-being. That means spying on any of us whom those in power deem to be acting contrary to the international and economic well-being of this country. That means giving the SIS the mandate to spy on the unions, to spy on the environmentalists, to spy on the anti-mining activists, to spy on anyone who says no to neoliberal globalisation, financial crises and the rest. Now we know that Helen Clark, for example, used the word wreckers to describe those of us who campaign against these agreements. The same language was used in a forum in the US recently, the US-New Zealand Business Council meeting, where those of us opposing the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement were deemed to be wreckers. This to me says we are fair game for the SIS, and being fair game for the SIS will now mean we are fair game for the GCSB. Now why does this matter? Well, we know that they are hell-bent on getting us out of their way. We found that up at the Sky City Casino in December when they blocked even those of us who were registered stakeholders from entering the building except for a very small time zone. We know now from the Pokies for Convention Centre deal that they've even required that we can't hire a room to have a lunch during negotiations lest we upset the international and economic well-being of New Zealand.
I've chosen the right menu.
Do we trust them then when they say these powers will only be used against those who have something to hide? Hell no! But this is not just about those of us in Aotearoa. One of the reasons we're really concerned about the implications of the GCSB bill is that we have a campaign across the 12 countries involved in these negotiations. Some of those countries, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, do not treat their dissidents nicely. They have internal security laws that allow people to be detained and to be interrogated for up to 2 years at a time without charge. Just last week, when the round of negotiations on the TPP was in Malaysia, there were 14 Malaysian activists from HIV/AIDS groups and others who were just on the footpath with placards, who were detained on the pretense that they were taking drugs and needed to be drug tested. Now imagine our government sharing the information of our weekly teleconferences as we strategise around the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement and what it will mean for those people. So the fight against this bill is not just our fight, it's our fight on behalf of others who are going to be trawled in this iniquitous web that they have in place.
Yeah.
So let me conclude by saying the campaigns that all of us are involved in different ways, in my case the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, but many of you others have international campaigns you're also a part of. Stopping the GCSB is an integral part of us being able to run those lawful, democratic, just campaigns. So we need to stop this bill, and I want you to join with me in sending a message to John Key. Kill the bill! Kill the
bill! Kill the bill! Kill the bill! Kill the bill! Kill the bill! Kill the bill! Kill the bill! Kill the bill! Kill the bill! Kill the bill! Kill the bill! Yeah!
Ladies and gentlemen, Jane Kelsey, we need her guidance now more than ever. Folks, I am here today for my beautiful, beautiful 3-year-old daughter. I know the GCSB are probably spying on me, I get that. But this law allows spying by association. We know that Keith Locke was spied on since he was the age of 10. That's outrageous. this bill will allow them to spy on my daughter just because she's my daughter. It's not her fault I'm her dad. They will spy on my friends because they're just my friends. They may spy on all of you because you're here today listening to me. That is how outrageous this damn piece of legislation is. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for a man who has faced so much. Kim.com! Hello everybody.
Hello.
Thank you all for coming today. This is a very important day because all of you are about to lose an important part of your basic human rights. And we need to say no. We need to say, stop this bill, John Key, because we want to fight for our rights to privacy.
Yeah.
Now, one thing you all need to understand, and this is very important, the GCSB is a subsidiary of the NSA. It is spying for the Americans to feed information for the war on terror so that the illegal drone strikes can identify the targets and kill those people up from above. 400 innocent civilians have died since that campaign started, including 100 children, in clear breach of international law, and we as New Zealanders are participating in this crime. The NSA has offices inside the GCSB building and is directing a lot of the operations that are going on today. And when you were told that there are 88 New Zealanders that were spied on illegally, that is only the New Zealanders we know about because the police and the SIS has filed official warrants for these investigations. You have no idea how many surveillance cases there are that the GCSB has initiated by themselves. Hundreds, maybe thousands of cases where New Zealanders were spied on directly. And we need to have that independent inquiry to find out what exactly these guys did.
Yeah.
You need to understand something. When they spied on me, they didn't spy on me because they suspected me of terrorism or because I'm a threat to national security. They spied on me because a handful of billionaires in Hollywood didn't like my business. I created a YouTube competitor, for God's sake. Why would you spy on me? I have given tools to people that allowed them to save money and use the internet the way it's meant to be used today. Online, easy to use for everybody. And I get rated like I am a drug lord or I'm a terrorist, terrorizing my family and invading my privacy. And if they can do that to me, they can do that to any of you. This GC